Then I'm happy to introduce the next architect, actually, Mr. Aursand, that is architect and have his own practice in Bodø. So I have been happy to work a lot with Even through the years, especially with the Vickers houses, about renovating and restoring older wooden buildings. And Even has been an active debater in about Bodø's development too. So welcome, Even.
Yeah, thank you. It's a very, very small practice I have, just to say that. I'm not used to these kind of settings, so I'm just going to read what I've written. It's maybe not that exciting to do it that way, but for me that's the best way. So, can we cope with the wind? That's the issue. Coming from Trondheim, studying in the architectural school in Oslo, I had little experience with wind until I stayed 6 months in Vadsø, which is in eastern Finnmark up north. Like Bodø, Vadsø is situated so that the dominating wind also is the direction of the most important streets going from the living areas to the center of the city. Like Bodø, this is natural because of the topography. Living in Vadsø, we had periods we stayed at home because we simply could not make the trip downtown, especially in the winter and without the car. We stayed in Vadsø because we were doing a paid project about possible improvements in the urban areas for the country municipality, and also because we needed a break in the studies. The year after, we made a project in school where we tested out different ways of organizing the housing for a new fictive area in Vadsø. We did this by building a huge physical model. It was about 3-4 quadrat meters of the terrain, arranging the houses and roads, and then blowing semolina, a semilygrin, with a hairdryer from west-northwest and other important directions. We worked nearly 5 months with this, using about 6 kilos of semolina. Believe it or not. It was interesting, even though many of the teachers, they did not understand what we were doing. And that was maybe the main reason for us passing the semester. Later, they told us that the cleaning staff found semolina 5 years after we had graduated. I can't show you anything from this semester. It was 40 years ago, and most of the project was just illustrated through black and white photos and like big drawings of the wind and what we thought was the right directions. Then moving to Bodø, 8 years later, I was surprised to find out that Bodø had many of the same challenges as Vadsø. Until they started building a number of tall buildings, I accepted the fate of the city and concentrated my interest on wind and its influence on small architectural improvements in our own projects. But my fascination for what the wind can do and how it in fact can be used, like in Vadsø, where we could use the wind to blow the internal roads and entrances clean from snow, if we design this in the right way, this has stayed with me all the time. As a result, I took my fascination for the wind at home, so to say. I live on the northern side of Bodø, and the wind here is even more predictable than the one in the city. The winds coming with snow comes mainly from east, northeast, and from the mountains. As we have a 90 meters long driveway up to the house, I built snow screens according to the directions of the snowdrift. Actually, I think I'm the architect with the longest, screens in Norway. Not to brag much about that, but that's a fact. When you build these screens, about 80-90% open with double walls that function as long as you find the right distance from screens to the access road. it was really easy to see how efficient they were. Since I was a bit younger and still enthusiastic, I contacted the road authorities. I had made a calculation on how many trips with the snowplow they could save. I also made a point of how interesting the design both could be like land art and how it could define the landscape in an interesting way. They never responded. Well, home used to be a small cabin, but is now several houses on this small hill towards the ocean, north of Bodø. We have a great view, but also a lot of wind. The cabin, which was built in 1936, have like prefabricated timber walls. And even if the shape of the house and the roof probably were random, it is meeting the challenge of the wind in a fascinating way. Whether the wind comes from west-southwest or from the dominating east, the shape of the roof seems to break up the wind, or maybe it speeds up the wind because of the curved roof and the longer distance for the wind to travel. I'm not 100% sure of how it works, but it works. And the outdoor areas get less wind. And of course, it helps to have such a low facade towards the wind. Later, we built an annex with the conscious roof design and a carport with the curved roof, but I will not go too far into the more personal experiments I have done on the property. I will mention the facade towards the mountain and the dominating wind. The old log houses did, because of its irregularity, break up the wind more and most of the smoother surfaces one uses today. When you don't build with exposed logs, it's important to find other wind-breaking designs. I therefore tried using local aspen, actually from around here, to find a design that could break up the wind, and in this case, to allow me a more protruding roof cornice. The open paneling, slightly tilted, seems to work fine. Actually, I have many principles that I try to follow up in my projects when building in the northern regions. And since it's something to do with the climate and the wind, I will mention one of them. I don't know the proper English name for it, but I call it a swallow passage. It is, if it's put on the right place and designed right, it will be both practical and important. It works as a small sheltered working place outside. It can be a nice architectural element to the facade. It will protect the facade and it can help with the wind. You can use it to blow away the snow, creating a wind tunnel, or putting it on the calm side of the house and in that way moving the snow away from the house. But when I try to promote this, my own little small darling, to the customers, most of them say no. They want to use these areas for building living spaces indoor. This is like a problem in Norway, I think. And as long as these square meters counts in the total build-up area, it is often hard to argue. Then to Bodø, since that is the closest city and at the same time a city that too often gives me the shivers, so to say. Not because of the cold, but because of the lack of understandable strategies and principles in planning and house building. I work in Bodø, but I usually say I don't live there. I'm simply a bit embarrassed. The design of Bodø in general, especially downtown, could have been worldwide famous for a city taking care of the wind, coping with the wind, and using a design respecting the wind. The headline for this small talk is, can we cope with the wind? And the answer is probably yes. But in Bodø, it is a big no. Some people say that the inhabitants in Bodø are born with some sort of wind competence, or they learn it. After some years, you know exactly where the wind will hit you, where you have to hold on to your hat or to your skirt, how to walk, bending a bit forward, but not too much. In combination with icy pavements, it can be great fun to watch this when you're inside. Many seems to be proud of the wind as a phenomenon, but it does something to us in the long run. It is a problem for the houses, and it is a problem for people because you stay more indoor. We have problems creating good meeting places and public spaces outdoor. The tall buildings situated in what I call random places gives us more shade, more wind, and less view to important and iconic landscape scenery. Due to the wind challenge, you could expect the wind to be one of the main issues in the municipality's urban planning. It's hardly mentioned with the word. In Bodø, it should also be on top of the checklist when building new houses, but it's not even on the list. Just think about the urban planning and architectural design in Bodø if it had one common intention of taming the wind, controlling the wind, and showing buildings, building forms, roof forms, and facades that took a stand against the wind. With the climate changes, this knowledge could be both important and it could be competence that Bodø could promote and sell. I will, before I stop this talk, share some questions and ideas with you. Why do people still choose very dark colors on the facades when you know that wooden materials get overheated and cracks open for the rain coming in almost horizontally in our climate up north and along the coastline? In the downtown area, this will lead to very warm facades that mostly creates more wind than necessary in some of the public spaces on the ground in the summer. Why do we always have the same color and material on all our 4 facades on a building, although we know that the sun, wind, and rain often ask for different qualities? We have seen this in pictures and on places around here. Can we change the climate in the downtown areas to prevent people from doing both their shopping and in many cases having their social meeting points in the big malls outside the core of the city? Is it all about free parking, or is it possible that the climate also matters? In that case, how can we change this? Do we have to build a gigantic roof over the streets, or can we do as in some of the historical cities established roofs above the pavements or houses above the pavements? Can we use different elements on the facades, shaping new houses differently, shaping the roofs according to the wind situation and not according to the cheapest solution? Can we have focus on breaking up the wind in some of the streets and on some of the public spaces? Can we learn anything from how the city was before the bombing in 1940? Could we establish a big informative weather balloon over the city, giving us information about the wind, and in that way increase our interest for the climate and the wind in the city? We have regulations when it comes to load-bearing structures on the roof, which differs from place to place according to how much snow you can expect on the specific place in Norway. Even if this does not take in consideration the wind and the chance of snow storage, it is at least regulations according to where you build in this long stretch country. When it comes to wind, it is taken care of in big buildings by the engineers. But it would be interesting to have a different climate zones or wind zones as point of focus, and especially as help when placing the building and giving the building an overall shape. The last 2 buildings in Bodø is called the Storm, it's rather ironic, and 360, meaning the degree of the view sector. You could actually see them on the other picture where you also could see the church tower. These buildings are situated downtown, and you try not to pass these buildings when it's windy. The winds come falling down created by the turbulence, and it also creates a nasty wind corridor, even if the building on the other side is not that tall. In the process of making the regulation plan, only one of the projects offered analysis for the wind. The analysis proposed mitigating measures, but none of them were established. It seems like the height of the building is only discussed when somebody decides to end their life jumping out of the upper floors. We can learn from this, but I do not know if we do. The investors in the city is now planning a new tall building, and even if the Office for Urban Planning is skeptical, money might succeed in the end. The last big public space in Bodø is what they call the Mayor's Park or Rådhusparken. Here they created a totally flat space with very little of the right vegetation, no wind screens or shelters. The space is too big and flat, and there is a reason why we don't have many big public spaces up north. But in Bodø, they decided that we can do it. The park is used in summertime, but it is not fit for many activities rest of the year. They are now planning for a new city because they are moving the airport. I do not have much time to go into this. They all have many questions to the plans made by the architect Henning Larsen or his company. The urban planners have many important and promising issues in their preliminary plan. But again, climate and wind is not one of the top priorities. The last design guide for what they call Hernesmyra shows a radial street design, which is an improvement from the rectangular design following the landing field's direction, which was the first one, and which will be the first solution. But planning is one thing, building is something else. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Even. I will take questions, but just a small comment first. There was a guy from this village who commented when this new hotel called The Storm was built in Bodø, and they built on the quay in front, and he said, well, I actually don't understand it. They say they build it for the tourists, but when you're making family pictures, you don't put the tall ones in the front. So, yeah. Are there any questions, comments? Yeah.
Thank you. This was so interesting, and I'm born and raised in Bodø, so I was just thinking, and I'm sharing my thoughts with you, because the wind has never been a problem for us living in Bodø. It's when it's not wind, it's a problem to live in Bodø, because then the herring oil factory was having the smoke as a fog over all the city, and we just couldn't bear it. So, but of course, this was very interesting what you told about, and then also, I never knew how much it blowed, how much wind we had in Bodø before I moved from the city. Because then I discovered that this is not worldwide. It's just and we never learned how to use an umbrella. That was impossible. So, so thank you.
Thank you. I have one small question. When they plan new areas for housing in Bodø and other places, they most commonly remove all the trees. What does the trees in a house area mean for the wind? Do you think it's important to keep some trees?
I think it means a lot, and you can see the plan of Bodø or the photos of Bodø before the bombing, and the new city was built after the war. There were a lot of trees, lots of like fences, and the streets were more irregular than what you can see today. So Even people maybe think that it's only the big things you have to do. Small things like vegetation, small fences, and just breaking up the streets a little bit can work for, for this wind problem.
I'm a sailor and quite interested in wind, of course. And you say they don't take care of this wind in building new houses in Bodø. And some years ago, when they planned buildings around the old radio station, I've seen some pictures where they have wind, where they try to find out of the wind. But in reality, it's so difficult. So I don't know if the computers can manage to find out how to place the house in the city in Bodø, because it's so many corners and where the wind goes round. I think you have to ask the neighbor who lives there about the wind. This new things of computers, I don't think they can even manage to find out how to do. And that was, of course, in former times when they lived in a valley here in Jønes. They know, the neighbor know how to do the houses. That was not a problem. But in Bodø, the new things, the new architects with this can't find out, I think.
There are several problems. One of them is, of course, that many of the people coming building, they're not local people. That's as you say, talking to the neighbors is maybe the best thing you can do. They will tell you how the local wind will work. And don't try to build a big model and use semolina, because that's not going to tell you a lot. But it will give you some idea, of course. But I think, as I was saying, just that when you're building a house, somebody on the outside, like in this issue, the municipality should ask you the question, have you thought about the wind? Is it an issue at all? That would be important. But as I say today, it's not even a big issue. And that's because we know the wind is going to get stronger. And as I say, most people in Bodø, they don't probably care. But we have people coming to Bodø. We have tourists, and we have small children. I mean, it is important to think about it.